The First Gnostic Church of Christ. We are on video number 4. We pick up where we left off regarding the creation of the Atomus and the 4 great luminaries, or the 4 great Aons. And those 4 great Aons being brought about through Barbelo, which is the mother of them all, or the spiritual feminine of the great monad, and then the counterpart to that being the Bythos, the father. And they two together brought about Logos, Autogens, which is the perfect human Atomus, and the father of all of that Atomus race is known as Seth. Seth also, some sects believe that Seth founded Kabbalah. We're going to pick up where we left off here. It says, Then the great Seth, the son of the incorruptible man Atomus, gave praise to the great, invisible, uncallable, unnameable, virginal spirit. So remember that the great and virginal spirit is the monad, it's the first father, it's the unnameable, the invisible spirit. It is the emanator of all things, and the Atomus is that thrice male child, which is the 3-part human being, which is the physical, soul-oriented, and spiritual-oriented human being. Seth being the first soul-oriented human being, and the first physical human being Adam and Eve among that lineage of the Hebrew, coming out of the garden into the physical world. And then the first man to have begotten the spiritual nature of the Christ was Jesus. So you have then Adam, the physical man, which is the first manifestation of the physical man, that then a rib was taken from him, and then the woman was created. They cling to each other, having been separated. When God says, no, let no one take them asunder, in this case, they were split in half by the Demiurge, or the Jehovah God in the Old Testament, being the first liar, the first murderer, the first that confused mankind. And then from there, the third son after Cain killed Abel, and Cain was sent to the land of Nod, became Seth, which is the soul-oriented human being appointed by the Father. Seth then could be thought of as the second appearance of the Christ, and Sophia appearing in the mother of Seth, I believe it's the mother of Seth, Noria, being the second incarnation of the feminine, Sophia. And then finally, the spiritual conception of the Christ through Mary, from her womb, then the completion of that mission through the spiritual nature of Christ appearing a third time, and the man Jesus. So Seth is that son of the incorruptible man, Atomus. And from there, the male virgin, the thrice male child, and the male virgin Yaol. It is from the soul man, and this comes about in the secret book of John, as well as we get to understand this in the Gospel of the Egyptians. Yaol is referring to the pure essence of the Jehovah God, the 4 elements that interact with each other to create all the synergistic aspects of life here in the canonic realm, or the physical realm. And Esaphet, which is the child of the child. Esaphet being essentially the holder of glory and crown of his glory. That is the church, or the body of Seth, or the children of Seth. And the great Doxamidon Aons. Doxamidon Aons, you could think of them as being the spiritual equivalent to the ones that understand the theories and the great knowledge behind all the formulas that bring about all the processes, the universe. And then the Pleroma, which I mentioned before, and asked for his seed. And then Seth asking for his seed, meaning that he also was able to emanate. Then there came forth from that place the great power of the great light, Placidia, the mother of the angels and the mother of the lights. And Placidia is known as that great mother of all the angels. You could think of her as being almost the counterweight to the male force out of control, which would be the Demiurge. And those angels have a dual appointment to both guard the 4 winds, in this case, to nurture the 4 elements in mankind. Therefore, she's known as the 4-breasted mother. She's the mother of all the angels, and so she counterweights the Demiurge, although they have no consortation, because they are separated, because he's separated from his feminine nature. He's basically male nature out of control. And the mother of the lights, and the lights being the 4 lights we talked about, the luminaries. And the glorious mother, the virgin with the 4 breasts, bringing the fruit from Gomora. And Placidia also is sometimes referred to the actual pasture in which Seth raised and cultivated his farm, or his home, and his animals, and nurtured and cultivated the land in that area of Gomora and Sodom, bringing the fruit from Gomora as spring, and Sodom, which is the fruit of the spring of Gomorrah, which is in her. So another way of thinking of it is she's somewhat like Mother Nature. She came forth through the great Seth. So meaning she wasn't Seth's progeny, but she worked through Seth, meaning he cultivated, he worked the ground that then brought forth her intention, bearing fruit, bearing life, bearing all things that were nurtured and cared for. Then the great Seth rejoiced after the gift which was granted him by the incorruptible child. And the corruptible child, again, is Adamus and also the Christ, the one and the same. Adamus is the perfect human, and Christ is the essence of that perfect aeon for humans that bring about redemption from ignorance, or gnosis, brings about gnosis essentially. And then that gift of being able to have that power to have seed, in other words, to be able to bring life through him, through Seth the Father, in the soul sense of things. From here, with the four breasts, the virgin, and the breast referring to the four elements, which is the essence of all life, the nectar of life, the juice of life, the milk of life. The virgin, and he placed it with him in the fourth aeon, or in the four aeons, in the third light Devatai. Now remember, there are the four great aeons that were referred to earlier, Harmazil, Ariel, Devatai, and Elilith. And prudence is grace, which is Devatai. That was that particular aeon's domain. They each have two other domains, but the primary domain, at least for Devatai, is grace, or also sometimes known as prudence. And so when it talks here about how Seth placed his seed in all of the aeons, he worked through all of the aeons, but primarily the third great light, Devatai, or Devatai, you can pronounce it either way, in that it's saying that it's by grace that his work was possible. Grace referring to truth, also referring to free will. Grace essentially and free will are really the same thing. All things are permitted, but not all things are prudent. It is to practice experience, to practice life through experience that brings about wisdom. And this is allowed through the body of Sophia, which is wisdom. After 5,000 years, the great light Elilith spoke. Remember, Elilith is that fourth aeon that came to speak to Noria to help her get out of the burning ark. Let someone reign over the chaos and Hades, she says. This is really to allow that there be the catalyst for expansion into eternity. So chaos, or Hades, is that which is not. It is the opposite of the light. You can't think of it as the opposite of order, but rather it's the opposite of everything that is. It is that nothing. It is that thing that is not. That is Hades. That is chaos. Elith is essentially saying now we're ready to allow for the Heilig being to come about. This Heilig being is able to demonstrate, meaning through demons, in the physical body, the nature of experiencing gnosis in action through the physical body. The physical body being a mechanical thing, which is a artificial reflection of the real thing, the spiritual perfect human. So this becomes an imperfect reflection, and it is an illusion. So in that sense, it is simultaneously the paradox of being of God the perfect, or the monad, but yet not being. It is a way of allowing free will. So this is what Elith is saying. She's saying this needs to have a way to bring about expansion into the unknown. This allows for the Father to be the unknowable, because the Father is always expanding into the not. And there appeared a cloud whose name is Heilig Sophia, and this is where the anomaly comes about. She looked out on the parts of chaos, her face being like in her form blood. Now it's got ... here, so not clear on that's being said here. And the great angel Gamaliel spoke to the great Gabriel, and Gamaliel being one of the synergistic pairs of one of the great aeons. It was Harmazil. And Gabriel also being one of the consorts to one of the great aeons. The minister of the great Ariel, he said, let an angel come forth in order that he may reign over the chaos and Hades. Now this account may be somewhat different from the secret book of John's account. Each one of these are written by different authors who are getting similar visions, but they may have a different interpretation of that vision. And so they will recount it the way they understood it. And so you may see some disagreement, just as you would see across the four Gospels. They're not consistent. There are going to be some things that are inconsistent, because these are different authors that are having their own account described in their writings. And so the minister of the great Ariel, he said, let an angel come forth in order that he may reign over the chaos and Hades. Then the cloud, being agreeable, came forth, and the two monads, and this is not the capital monad, meaning the monad, but it's the lowercase monad, and the two being a kind of pair, each one of which had a light, the throne. And the first of those, which she had placed in the cloud above, then sackcloth, meaning the Demiurge, or Yaldabaoth, sometimes called Yaldabaoth, the great angel, saw the great demon who is with him, Nubriel. And Nubriel is the great demon. So he's the head charge of all the demons. And then he is a kind of counterpart to Yaldabaoth. And together they are the legion known as the Demiurge, Jehovah being part of that legion. And they became together a begetting spirit of the earth. They begot assisting angels. And so those angels came to understand the Demiurge and his mission and became agreeable to that mission. Sackcloth said to the great demon, Nabriel, let the 12 Aons come into being in the Aons worlds. So in other words, let Aons come from the pleroma that want to be begetted in the physical realm and agree with the mission of the Demiurge, and let them represent the 12 constellations. So in this case, they became angels while simultaneously being Aons, because the Aons represent abstract ideas like courage, fear, etc., etc. So then you have these different characteristics that each one of the zodiac signs end up having. And in this case, there are 12, and they came into being, and they became worlds. The great angel, Sackcloth said, by the will of the Autogens, there shall be the ... of the number 7 ... In this case, not clear what it's saying, but I'm supposing is referring to the 3, which is thrice male, and then the 4 great lights, which make up 7. But in the physical realm, its reflection or its counterpart would be the 7 planets, the 7 great planets, Saturn being the last planet among the 7 in the ancient world. And then when we go into the age of Aquarius, then we're able to go beyond, have the Sabbath or the 7th planet, and able to then discover other aspects of humanity's consciousness or awareness. And then therefore we discover Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And he said to the great angels, go and let each of you reign over the world. Each one of these 12 angels went forth. The first angel is a Thoth, and this is the scribe, the one that writes everything down as a kind of repository for knowledge. Knowledge as well as history and those kinds of things. He is the one whom the great generations of men call ... We don't know here. Again, this wasn't clear on the papyrus. The second is Hermes, who is the eye of the fire. This is the great passion, causes men to go to war. But he is in control of the harmonies or disharmony. And the third is Galilea. And the fourth is Yobel. The fifth is Aldonius, and he's the counterpart to Yaldabaoth, because Yaldabaoth was out of control, basically. And so Sophia brought about Sabaoth in order that Adonai, being beloved of God, of the perfect physical godlike being. Sabaoth, he is in charge of the host of angels, and he creates a balance to the Yaldabaoth. He is the good side of the Demiurge, if you will, and then Yaldabaoth is the destructive side. The sixth is Cain, whom the great generations of men call the sun. The seventh is Abel, and this isn't the same as Cain and Abel, the children of Adam and Eve. These are great angels, okay? And they're the 12 great archangels that are even above Gabriel and Michael. And the great generations of men called the sun. The seventh is Abel, the eighth Acrasina, the ninth Yabil, the 10th Harmopil. And I don't know each one of these, their missions or what they're called for. The 11th is Arkir Altanai, and the 12th is Belias. These are the ones who preside over Hades and the chaos. And Hades and the chaos is where we are. We are living in that space beneath the Holy Souls realm and the pleroma. That realm, the outer realm. We're in the outer realm known as Hades, or the chaos. And after the founding of the world, Sackcloth said to his angel, I am a jealous God, and apart from me nothing has come into being, since he trusted in his nature. So you can see that this account is somewhat different from the Secret Book of John account. But the key here is understanding the nature of each one of these realms as we're going into the lower realms now. And you can see that Sackcloth is very narcissistic, right? Then a voice came from on high saying, the man exists and the son of man. And that voice on high is coming from the pleroma, coming from the monad, reminding sackcloth that he isn't the God of everything, that man, Adamus, exists, and that the Aons were created to be attributes of the great monad that would then work through man. So in essence, the Aons were to be part of God that was to serve the head. And the head in this case being the Adamus, being, or the monad. But of course, sackcloth couldn't accept that. And that's what it talks about in the canonical text, how some of the demons, angels, they rebelled because they couldn't imagine lowly man would be raised up higher than some of these angels. Because of the descent of the image above, which is like its voice and the height of image, which is looked out through the looking out of the image above, the first creation was formed. And it was formed because, again, sackcloth was then able to have a blueprint to do his sort of imperfect mock-up of creating a man, right? And also because of this, that simultaneously, metanoia came into being. In other words, metanoia means being able to have spiritual transformation. Basically, metanoia is spiritual transformation, or changing of the mind, renewing of the mind. She received her completion and her power by the will of the Father, and his approval, with which he approved of the great, incorruptible, immovable race, the great mighty men of the great Seth, in order that he may sow it in the Aons which had been brought forth. So the great monad knew that some of the Aons would rebel, knowing that they would be in service to the Adamus through Sophia. And Sophia couldn't also simultaneously accept that she was already at the level of the monad, and therefore she brought about emptiness, or she brought about insufficiency and insecurity, basically, and that resulted in an anomaly that then rippled into humankind being wounded, bringing about an aborted Yaldabaoth, or the Demiurge, that then believed that he was almighty, because he was all basically just consumed in his insecurities. So he was pontificating and just sort of telling everybody, I'm God, and I'm going to use intimidation and fear to rule over you, and you will call me Lord. And that's where Lord God gets introduced in the second chapter of Genesis, whereas in the first chapter he did not appear. And so that's the second creation of the second human, the Adam. Prior to that, there was no Adam. There was only a man that was created, called a he, both male and female, called a him. And then so this is where he split them, and that's where Christ talks about, let no one put asunder what the true Father intended to be together from the beginning. All right, so this is the mighty men of the great Seth, in order that he may, so there go, already the monad knew that since they would rebel, it was through the lineage of Seth, meaning everybody, that, because remember that during the flood, everybody was wiped out. It was only through the lineage of Seth that humans survived. So we are all children of Seth. In order that he may sow it in the Aons, ultimately mankind would become the redeemers of the Aons that had rebelled and fallen from the monad, which had been brought forth, so that through her, metanoia, through transformation, this is one of the Aons known as metanoia, that allows for the space or the womb of spiritual transformation, renewing of the mind, the deficiency may be filled up. So this is the sole purpose of man coming to this realm, is to redeem the Aons. For she had come forth from above, down to the world, meaning Sophia, through the incarnation known as Achamoth, which is the image of the night, sometimes also known as Mary. When she had come, she prayed for the repentance of both the seed of the archon of this Aeon and the authorities who had come forth from him, meaning all the angels and demons, that defiled the seed of the demon begetting God, which will be destroyed, and the second of the seed of the great Seth, which is like the sun. So all, including the Aeon, all the angels, all of the demons, all the great powers in the heavens, including all of humanity, that Sophia would come here to be the body of humanity, the body of the universe, basically, to sacrifice itself, to provide for sustenance and life. And then that would allow for a avenue by which redemption could unfold itself ultimately through humanity, and Christ would be the first begotten Son to represent the spiritual aspect of the monad that is the instrument by which all things are transformed. And so then the great angel Hermos came to prepare through the virgins of the corrupted sowing of this Aeon in a Logos begotten holy vessel through the Holy Spirit, the seed of the great Seth. So it was Hermos, it was one of the angels. Now this is not a Aeon, but it was an Aeon that came to this realm. It was one of the great archon or archangels that came to prepare that sown seed of this Aeon, meaning the Christ, that it would put into Seth the understanding of the Christ to come through the Jesus man. Then the great Seth came and brought his seed, and it was sown in the Aons which had been brought forth, their number being the Mount of Sodom. Some say that Sodom is the place of the pasture of the great Seth, which is the Gomorrah, but others say that the great Seth took his plant out of Gomorrah, planted in the second place, to which he gave the name Sodom. So Sodom and Gomorrah are where he sowed knowledge. It's referred to in it was sown in the Aons, which had been brought forth. The Aons are not like the Aons in the Pleroma, but they are attributes or abstract concepts and ideas that he wrote down. So this is really, in my interpretation, it's telling you that he wrote down knowledge in books about attributes, much in the way Christ was 40 days, 40 nights in the desert, meditating on the four great luminaries and their essences, and the thrice male child, which is the 3 and the 4, which make up the holy or the spiritual number 7. So this is what Seth did. He brought that knowledge and he wrote it down. And it says, some say Sodom is the place of the pasture of the great Seth, meaning where he sowed that, or he wrote that down, which is in Gomorrah. And then others say that he took his plant out of Gomorrah and planted the second place, which is given the name Sodom. So it's a little unclear where this knowledge was originally. Now, I don't know if it's actually the part of the canonical texts, or it's also part of the Gnostic text that was carried on, and then eventually it ended up at Nag Hammadi. Maybe that's what's referring to here. I'm not sure. This is my take on what's being said here. Okay, and then we're going to go down to a couple more paragraphs here and wrap it up. This is the race which came forth from Adoka, for she gave birth to the world. And then Adoka, I don't know if this is a person, I don't know if this is an Aeon, this is an angel, it's not clear. For she gave birth through the word to truth and justice, the origin of the seed of the eternal life, which is with those who will preserve, because of the knowledge of the emanation. This is the great incorruptible race which has come forth through 3 worlds to the world. And so they have started from the Pleroma through the Holy Souls realm and then finally to this realm. Adoka, I guess, had been all along with Seth to bring about making sure that these words, this knowledge, was to be pure, not corrupted, and that it would be based on fairness and justice, so it would be balanced, and that would be have to be carried, safeguarded through the 3 realms, even including through the flood. And the flood came as an example of why it had to be safeguarded for the consummation of the Aeon, to consume that knowledge. Now that Aeon is that knowledge. It's not the doxamenon Aeon in the Pleroma, but it's the Aeon. But it will be sent into the world because of this race, meaning the Sethian lineage. A conflagration will come upon the earth, and grace will be with those who belong to the race, through the prophets and the guardians who guard the life of the race. And the race is referring to that Sethian lineage that had to carry this knowledge to Mary and Jesus the man, who would then meditate on it and then become the first to beget the Christ in the spiritual form. Because of this race, famines will occur and plagues. So all of these terrible incidents you're reading in the Old Testament, they're all to try to stop this knowledge. And it's also what's referred to in Revelations, where the woman had the 12, I don't remember, I think it was 12 stars beneath her feet and then the moon above her head. But this is in how she spent many months in the desert. I think it was 40 months. And this is what, again, it's referring to that this entire lineage purpose was to carry. Remember, the soul is carrying the knowledge. It is the knowledge. It is the repository knowledge. It is the radar system that picks up the signals and carries that and then delivers it to its Ingo. And that Ingo was the Jesus man, who would then announce it to the world. But these things will happen because of the great incorruptible race. Because of this race, temptations will come, a falsehood of false prophets. And all these prophets, that want to talk about laws and try to get man to believe that the perfect human, Adamus, they are imperfect, they need to be saved, they're sinful, they're no good. Then the great Seth saw the activity of the devil in his many guises and his schemes, which will come upon his Seth's incorruptible, immovable race, in the persecutions of his powers and his angels, and their error that they acted against themselves. Then the great Seth gave praise to the great uncallable virginal spirit and the male virgin Barbellin. The male virgin Barbellin. Remember that from the perspective of Seth, that would be male, because Barbello is female that brought forth the thrice male. When a woman is bringing forth a child, this is a projection into space and time. That particular activity is male in nature. Anything that's passive, that is a receptacle, is feminine. Anything that is project is masculine. So that therefore Babela becomes masculine from the standpoint of Seth. In the thrice male, Tamila, Tamila, highly, highly, Makar, Makar, Seth. The power which really, truly lives. In the male virgin, Yo'ol, and Esaphet, and the holder of glory, the crown of his glory, and the great Dexamadon Aon, and the thrones which are in him, and the powers which surround them, and the whole pleroma, as I mentioned before, and he asked for guards over his seed. So he got guides and angels and guardians and all these things to help him and his progeny along the way to deliver what was written down in the Aeonic or the Aeon texts that's referred to as a seed that was sown in that place, Sodom or Gomorrah or both. I'm not really sure. No one really knows. It could be either way. But he requested those guards to make sure that their lineage, of course, would be safeguarded, and that message ultimately would be safeguarded and delivered ultimately to the man that was come, known as the Messiah to come. And that's what we got up to now. So we're going to stop it there, and we'll pick back up in the next video.